Thank you for letting me be a part of your day. It's nice to see many of you again, and great to meet the rest of you. One of my favorite characters from history is the polar explorer Ernest Shackleton, an amazing man. His selfless acts of courage are better known and marveled at today than when they occurred almost 100 years ago. I like Shackleton because he repeatedly overcame impossible odds in hopeless situations. In 1914, 2 years after losing the race to the South Pole, Ernest Shackleton set out to cross the entire continent of Antarctica, a trip of almost 2,000 miles. He and his crew of 27 men left Buenos Aires, Argentina in mid-December, which is late spring in the southern hemisphere. On approaching land, Shackleton and crew encountered much more ice than they thought they would. Soon their ship, the Endurance, was hopelessly stuck in the ice pack. The crew spent the rest of that Antarctic summer in futile attempt to dig themselves free. Finally, efforts were abandoned and preparations made to winter on the ship. Locked within the ice, the Endurance drifted, all the while being crushed by the moving ice. The ship was sinking. And as it did, the men left relative comfort of the ship behind. With 3 small lifeboats and all the provisions they could carry, the men set off across the ice in search of navigable water and land. With little food and meager shelter, the men faced near certain death in a hostile environment. Against all odds, and with another winter upon them, they finally made it to the northern edge of the pack. Encountering open water, the men sailed the 3 small lifeboats to a remote and barren island called Elephant Island. There was no hope for rescue, so Shackleton chose 5 men to accompany him on a desperate mission. The closest inhabited island was South Georgia Island, 800 miles away. In a 22-foot lifeboat, they accomplished the impossible, surviving a 17-day journey in the dead of winter through the world's worst seas. Unbelievably, they made it to South Georgia Island. From there, Shackleton commandeered a larger ship to rescue the men he had left behind. Throughout the entire 2-year ordeal, not one man was lost. Much has been written and said about Shackleton and his men. How did they do it? Facing certain death time and again, how did they all survive? I think it was their tremendous resolve to survive, to keep moving on, regardless of the obstacles they faced. They also lived in the moment, never looking back or too far forward. They dealt with only what was in front of them and moved on. They never panicked either. Regardless of the situation, they trusted in Shackleton and in each other completely. They were a tremendously courageous group of men. So, why am I here? And why did I tell that story? Quite simply, I'm here because you going to win a national championship, and I want to be here to see it. And the story is all about you, and maybe a little bit about me. I was a pretty good middle distance runner in high school, good enough to be recruited and to run cross country and track at Butler. My decision to attend Butler was easy. I love this place. When I graduated in 1989, I was fortunate to use my Butler connections to get a job in the radio division at MS Communications as a salesperson. As MS Communications grew and bought more radio stations, I was promoted several times and put in charge of a sales department of a station we had in Chicago. At 32, I was responsible for the revenue of one of the largest and most profitable radio stations in the country. I had a blessed life. I had the physical and mental gifts of a strong body and mind. My life, however, changed completely in January of 2000 when I was diagnosed with ALS, amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, commonly known as Lou Gehrig's disease. ALS is a fatal degenerative neuromuscular disease that affects the synapse between the voluntary muscles and the nerves that control them. Eventually, all of the body's voluntary muscles atrophy and fail. Ultimately, each person with ALS dies when their diaphragm stops working and they stop breathing. When diagnosed, ALS patients are told the same thing Lou Gehrig was told more than 60 years ago. ALS has no known cause, no treatment, and no cure. Over the next 4 years, you will lose your ability to use your arms, and hands, and you will not be able to walk, you will not be able to speak or swallow, and finally you will not be able to breathe. ALS is 100% fatal, and you will most likely be dead in 4 years. That was over 10 years ago that I was told these things, and the only way I have gotten through these years is by living like Shackleton and his men. I try to live like you play. You are my inspiration. I cannot wait to see you play live and in person tomorrow night. You have a tremendous resolve to survive, to keep moving on, and regardless of the obstacles you face, you also live in the moment, never looking back or too far forward. You deal with only what is in front of you, and you move on. You never panic either. Regardless of the situation, you trust in Coach and in each other completely. You are a tremendously courageous group of men. Thank you for inviting me to address you today. I count this opportunity as one of my greatest honors, and I hope you have gotten even a fraction of the benefit that I have gotten from being here. Thank you.
You've done it. Say thanks to Matt and to Trina and everybody else. And you know, obviously we're all thrilled that he's here.
Thank you so much.
Thanks. Yep. Make sure you introduce yourselves, okay?